All right. Like it says, boom. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Welcome down the Security Rabbit Hole to yet another edition of the Down the Security Rabbit Hole podcast. This is a fun one, as I say often, but having just come back from seeing Mission Impossible, the latest one, this is going to be a great episode, y'all. All right. I'm going to go around the corner, around the square here. It's like the Brady Bunch or maybe Celebrity Squares. I don't know. And introduce everybody. You guys know James. James, say hi.
Hey, how's it going?
Good. Awesome. Awesome. All right. And then two guys I used to work with that are going to be fun for this conversation. We'll start in the celebrity top right-hand corner, Mr. James Robinson. Howdy.
Hey, how's it going? And James, every time we get on these calls, I think we step on each other. So we'll try to do a better job this time.
A lot of J's on here too today, so this is going to be interesting.
Oh my gosh, we are. Yeah, we're full of J's.
And of course, last but not least, the one and only Mr. Jason Clark. How are you, Jason?
Very good. Happy to be here. Super fantastic.
You seem thrilled and excited. That can you guys just see how excited Jason?
I am. I'm still recovering. I went to the Snoop Dogg concert, and I'm still recovering.
Yeah, your eyes aren't bloodshot anymore.
And actually, James Robinson's at my house right now, so he's in a guest bedroom in the basement. And he was driving over here to do some work, because we have a big office here in St. Louis. And he was bringing his kids with him, and they broke down on the side of the road. So then Ashley had to drive to go get them. And so his whole family's here right now.
Wow.
Yep.
Well,
my wife felt like she was missing out, so then she drove over. So,
that's awesome. That's pretty fantastic.
Yeah.
Transmission went out on them.
Nice. Yeah. All right. So, guys, as I said at the top of the show, I just saw the new Mission Impossible, and I can't tell you how excited I am to talk about generative AI after seeing that movie. By the way, who's seen it? You guys seen it?
No.
Okay. So, spoiler alert: generative AI is the bad guy in this one, in this two-parter. And it's not like Chat GPT. This has become a sentient overlord that can hack into anything and be unseen and manipulate all the information in the world. Make cameras not see people, reroute nuclear submarines, all kinds of cool stuff.
It's like three-letter agencies we have currently in our,
but all in one tiny little piece of code.
Okay.
So I'm going to start off with this. There is an insane amount of hype on generative AI and what it means right now. But in the corporate environment, I'm going to go start with you guys, and I'll just pitch it to you and see what you think. What's the reality, the ground truth versus like how much of this is just hype? I'll either James or Jason pick it up. Not both at the same time though.
I'll start, and James has talked a lot about AI on a number of different things. He's going to have I'm going to defer to him a lot here because he's just spent a lot of time, talking to journalists and on stage, etc. But I definitely, me personally, in general, I believe it's probably the most significant thing that's happening and going to happen in tech ever. Now, I look at it equal to and greater than, essentially the internet, right, which enables it. And but we're kind of at the BBS, 20, was it 2800 baud or 2400 baud? I don't even remember anymore. But we're like in the dial-up. We're at AOL stage right now, and BBS maybe somewhere between that. It's very, very basic where we're at compared to where it's going to be. But I believe strongly it's going to be significant impact to our lives more than anything else has, and our kids' lives. But how fast is the big question, and there's a big debate in every conversation I'm in. How much good versus how much bad.
Mm.
Yep.
Robinson, thoughts?
I think it's a big deal. I think it's definitely a big deal. I think it's a tough thing. I think that the generative AI is an evolution on top of all the ML and all the work that we've been doing. Honestly, as in all various industries, and now the difference is that now my mom asked me about it, and now my mother-in-law is asking me about it, and oh yeah, by the way, I logged into ChatGPT and I did this, or I saw this on MSN, or I saw this on here, right? And so now it's also just that it's readily available. The technology is available to anybody who wants to use it, and I think that we've seen this before is the big thing. So in some cases, in the conversations I'm having, some of the cases are, well, how's this any different? And then other cases are like, oh my gosh, this just showed up at my front door, and I don't know what to do with it. And I think that the industry's kind of split, but I think it's a big deal. I think there's a lot of positive and a lot of benefit, that can come from using technologies like generative AI or AI and ML. And I think that we've seen that. I think the reason why we're able to scale today in security is because of ML and a lot of the data sciences that we've all been investing in and using. But there is a lot of risk with it, and we can draw parallels. Most of the conversations for everyone that I'm having discussion with, it's all drawing parallels because history rather, is brand new. It always repeats itself. We've learned that through history. And, it's like the first time when it was like, oh, we're going to have a VPN. Oh my gosh, we're releasing our corporate network to the internet. Oh, we're going to have a website. Raph, that was the first time you and I met, was web app hack, right? It's like, oh my gosh, SQL injection. Long time ago. SQL injection. Game over. No one can build a secure website, right? And you can just steal all the information, data, and everything out of it. And I think we take it as an industry.
Yeah,
it's interesting the parallel you draw though of, just like, my grandma's looking at this stuff. Like, when's the last time we had something technology wise like that, just anybody, like, not, I mean, right. I had my son come in at 11 years old and say, hey, I want to build a Minecraft game using ChatGPT. Like, what are you talking
I got one
about?
for you. It was Google. It was Google. The last time when it just became readily available and there was both good and bad was when someone could go to google.com and look up anything they wanted. And you could do Google dorking and Google hacking, and you could get in and you could find all this information that was shared that should have been shared, and all these different things, and you can do really cool stuff, all passive analysis and passive attacks. And oh yeah, by the way, you had just anyone could use it. And then they were also selling it to corporate environments. Sound familiar? ChatGPT selling it to corporate environments.
Yeah,
right? Like it's the same parallels.
Yeah. Okay, maybe, but and I'm with you guys, right? I think Jason, I think I'm probably closer to what you were saying. Is this is potentially now. I think that what we're seeing now is generative AI isn't developing anything new. It's taking massive amounts of data and essentially reorganizing and regurgitating a lot of what we know, which is great. Like I heard a good podcast a while back from, I think somebody who had Andreessen Horowitz or one of those folks that were talking about like what we can expect in the coming couple of years. And they said, the AI that we're going to see is going to be doing things like helping us maintain calendars better, because things that we do that are repetitive, right? Because it's a pain scheduling 5 people's calendars, like getting all of us on the same call like this. It's not simple. But saying, hey, Chat GPT, find us a time, the next available 1 hour slot between us four, and boom, it happens, right? So essentially helping our lives be more automated, be more mechanized. We're going to stop doing some things that we are finding as a pain in the butt right now that we have to do. The leap I'm concerned about, right, and all joking aside, and bad movie references, but I am concerned about getting to that point where in the military applications, AI starts to make AI, an algorithm, gets to make decisions about like who gets the bullet and where the rockets get launched. and human interactions of that. We're talking about self-driving cars. You guys remember that? Was it Stanford that did that? Jason, I think you sent it to me a million years ago. It was a website you could go to, and says, okay, it would ask you like 10 questions. There's like a grandmother, a fat person, a skinny person, an old person, a young person, and there's a crosswalk and there's a car, and there's people in the car and there's people on the crosswalk, and you had to decide like who effectively dies, right? Like, does the computer drive into the wall and kill the people in the car or in the crosswalk? And it turns out human biases are, well, human biases. We value the young over the old, the skinny over the fat, like all these typical things that we try to put out
And
of
if
our
you're the
memories and out of our
car,
mind, but it
and
happens,
you're the
right?
car company, you probably want to make the decision that's the least liable for them, where they're least likely to get sued.
Well, but that's the thing. It's going to require, when you get to this point, it requires us all to, when an algorithm takes over, we all have to, as a society, agree on the value of life and decisions to make in certain cases when it gets kind of the extreme fringes. I'm not sure I'm ready to put that into an algorithm yet.
Yeah. I think that so you might have seen this podcast. It's one of my favorite podcasts. That's not the show in general, but this episode. Joe Rogan and Elon Musk.
Yeah.
And it's an episode where, I think they had like five glasses of whiskey, and then for the first time, Elon smoked a joint on live air. Was getting text by his PR group and like, okay, what? Like, dude, you're a public company CEO. Like, what are you doing smoking a joint? And he's like, what's legal? Like, don't invest in my stock. I don't care. Right. And at the, after those, those two things, by, being buzzed and high at the same time, then Joe asked him a question, said, when do you think we'll be cyborgs? And Elon goes, well, we already are. And it's like, oh, that was a moment in my mind. Like, what do you mean? And he goes, look, the difference is just information and what you do with that information. And he basically said, so your parents had to go to the library and read an encyclopedia that was like 10 days dated of any information they wanted, and they relied on the news. And now you just look at your phone and you can find out almost anything, and you can calculate almost anything. And the difference of you being a cyborg versus not is purely the speed at which it enters your brain, which is your eyes and your ears. Okay. And the moment that thing can either be your brain and make decisions for you, which is what you're worried about, or you put a chip in your brain, which they're already doing, where the information goes into your brain faster for you to make a decision. Or maybe but the problem is his point was, you're already becoming a cyborg because you already have this digital thing that's connected to you 24/7 that's feeding you information into your brain. And it's just the speed at which it can go in and the decisions you make. And so, that's really interesting. And so I think the biggest number one issue today is bias.
Yeah. And now so to kind of pivot this into a direction where I think our listeners are going to really get thinking here is, as you start to drive these different technologies that the ability to have these generative AI produce, whether it's writing software, creating marketing content, whatever, we're handing off intellectual property potentially into a computer algorithm. There are so many implications there, right? This is not as simple as, like, the obvious implications here for me are, as soon as somebody started, as soon as ChatGPT fired up, people were feeding it corporate secrets, not realizing that those secrets go back into the model and somebody can get later. That's oh wait, hold on, how do I get that out? You don't. It's there forever, right? It's in the model until the model gets destroyed. And there are implications here from the corporate side of things. Like, how much can you trust something that is an algorithm that you don't have full control of in-house on your own systems, where you can nuke it if you need to? Like, this is sort of techno-philosophical part of this, right? Where it crosses into legal, it crosses into business strategy, and crosses into cyber. How do you guys see that? Because you guys tend to, as a day job, you guys work on safeguarding the exfiltration of critical information from companies. When I bet there's 100 employees in any company right now doing so without even thinking about it.
Yep. And there are labs. Our labs team's been doing research on it, and has some stuff that's coming out that's just exactly that on average. So you can, and this is, I think we're also at a critical moment. I remember when ransomware was just starting to pick up, and everyone was saying, "Oh my gosh, what's this thing of ransomware?" And no one was taking action. They were just like watching, monitoring, standing on the sideline. But there's intelligence, there's data, there's things that are coming out, reports that you can use to take back to your organization and help them make decisions. But that is the case. People are uploading data, they're sharing data, they're pushing data to these things. And it's not just like, hey, I want to send a better email response, so let me just load the email in and ask for a better email response. It is actual intellectual property, it's source code, and those different types of intellectual property that people are trying to protect and put a lot of controls and a lot of money in, and then it's just someone sharing it out.
Well, so what happens? Obviously, we want to protect. I'm going to get to how we're going to do this in a second, but what happens when? And this is just I guess a legal IP question. So you've got some source code, your developer, it's proprietary algorithm for something. Maybe it's a formulation for a drug or something, right? And one of your employees drops it into ChatGPT to try to get an answer on something. Hey, what's wrong with this source code? And suddenly it becomes part of, is it public domain? Is it now owned by the AI company? Like, what happens there? And if I use it, am I somehow committing theft, fraud? Like, those are some really interesting questions. Jason, have you guys thought about that?
There's no, in the US, there's no legal precedent yet. And so that code is yours, but the model's built off that code to help other people build. Is today not. There's no, it's like you can use the music industry where, there's being music created based off of models of other music. So that's, there's a bunch of lawsuits happening right now. So we'll see how that plays out. The FTC is definitely jumping in. They are doing an investigation on OpenAI after the Wimbledon thing happened. And it's really kind of more towards privacy and bias, right? The privacy of people and the bias because it giving opinions on something that's not real, or the hallucinations is kind of that's the scary thing that they're investigating right now. But to answer your question, I'm gonna start with, so you're one of these entities, right? You imagine, Raph, you're this is you, like your job is to be a Gen AI. What's your currency? It's data, right? So you want to find a way to ingest. You're like the Borg. You want all the information in the world you can get. Well, you've got the stuff on the internet. That's easy. Okay. Now you want to ingest the information that's sitting in all these companies, right? Because once you have that information, is however you get it, you can then start to build the models, and that's your currency. And now all of a sudden you're smarter than anything in the world, and you can outcompete anything in the world. And second, then you add the ability to communicate in language, which is that's the difference between, that's one of the massive differences between us and animals, right?
Yeah.
All of it, and how people are controlled. All of a sudden you combine those two things together. That's where it gets really interesting. So you have this thing that wants to, yes, make our lives better, but in the end, it's currency's data, and it wants to ingest as much of it as possible, make it easy to do that. So, anyways, to answer, I think it's a very real privacy issue that we're dealing with on. So the question is people are then setting up their personal instances, right? One, you shouldn't be sharing anything that you don't want out there. That should be kept private at all. because it's going to get, models will get built off of it. What we don't yet understand is if you have your own instances where you're being told because of an enterprise agreement that your stuff is separate and there's only models built on your stuff that's not shared, will that always be the case? And is that 100% true?
Yeah, that's the question that I was thinking about. You know, you sit inside the enterprise, right? And it's like, oh, well, Microsoft has their own stuff. And, you know, if you want Teams Premium or you want this, you know, it's got this stuff built in. So now in the enterprise world, you don't just have ChatGPT, like nobody's using ChatGPT directly. They're using all these different software components that are built off of similar technologies with their own backends. You know, and that's the question, right? People are like, okay, well, is this our own instance? We don't want our stuff being fed into everybody else's thing, you know, and now you're starting to track, you know, 20, 30 different tools that are doing something that originally started as one tool doing it.
Well, here's Robinson, I know you're going to say something, but I'm going to throw this in real quick. What I find interesting, Jason, you said, you know, data is the currency, knowledge is the currency, and I'm going to take it one step further, having the ability to manipulate people, thought, markets, and knowledge production based on input and output into this mathematical model, AI, makes it interesting because as we've seen, you can, somebody did a research paper on the fact that you can manipulate if you feed it enough information, you can manipulate the way it creates output, right? So you can, and we've seen citations done. There's an article a while back that said they were doing research in ChatGPT and they were finding really weird citations from like some scientific journal. They went back, it didn't exist. It just made it up based on some calculation of how citations were used in someplace else that looked approximate.
By the way, I've experienced that. I've experienced it making stuff up. We use it to plan our vacations, and I will see it make things up, and it's kind of
that's crazy, right? Yeah. So now, like the plot of the next great techno spy movie is written right now. Somebody hijacks OpenAI or one of these services based off of generative AI and starts to really mess with people's lives or corporations or God only knows financial forecasts, you know, financial markets, whatever. I'm a little concerned. Robinson, you're going to say something.
Yeah, I mean, I think the concern is there, but we're still so early on. I think it's the time for us to make that adjustment. Honestly, like the amount of data that's being shared, yes, with the models and with the services is huge. But in some cases, if you take you know, ChatGPT, OpenAI, and their partnership with Microsoft versus Google Bard, and Google already has so much of the data, right? That was the whole position when they even looked at ChatGPT early on was, well, ChatGPT, a lot of the data that it was fed came from Google, right? It came from, you know, what Google had already created and already had. So then you start looking at that and saying, well, the information's always there. How do we start to steer that and put the correct guardrails in place? And then when you get into the geopolitical side, it's a whole different mess, right? But if you just take in the U.S. and what we can influence in the U.S. and in Europe and such, I think that there's guardrails that we can definitely put in place. There's frameworks that exist. It's amazing. A couple of years ago, we started to look at a model that was published by KPMG. You know, it was a white paper that was online. You can still find it. And it was a controls matrix that essentially they mapped, and then they mapped that back into some common controls. We started governing ourselves with that. And then we started to pivot into now we're modernizing it since the NIST AI RMF framework is out, or risk management framework is out. You know, and so we're starting to pivot to that so we can have our own guardrails. That same level at a national level, that same level as it relates to a company. It's not just about like what are your controls that you have in place for access management, but then you get into like bias, like Jason was talking about. How do you govern how much bias? My bias is okay, but your bias isn't. Is that okay? I don't know. How much bias is okay? Right? If you can never remove bias, then how much bias is okay?
I love, James, that you're actually saying, you know, we need to focused on governing this. But like, if we look at most of like, I don't even know how much of Congress even understands tech. And this is like this is like 100x level, right? So that kind of gets really scary. I mean, I bet you there's a bunch of them that don't even like check their own email and cell phones.
I was gonna say, I hate to sound ageist, but I'm assuming, some of these folks that are in their 80s and 90s aren't exactly up on the latest and greatest tech, which is what scares the hell out of me, because who makes the rules then? The lobbyists. And who are the lobbyists?
I'd be
Well,
surprised, though. I was flipping through the channels, and I'll admit I don't know why or how, but I was flipping through channels and I landed on, it was like C-SPAN or something.
oh
and
God.
yeah, and they actually were doing, it was a year plus ago, and they were actually doing a congressional hearing on this path, and it was actually legitimate. Some of the things actually that they were
Okay.
talking about and trying to put in place were like, oh, that's pretty damn good.
Right.
Honestly,
the people
I was
speaking,
really-
the people there probably were legit. The people asking the questions were just fed questions by, their 20-year-old
still, that's-
interns.
Yeah, probably. I assume
That's
that.
actually, by the way,
I
that's
assume-
my biggest concern about the bias, is that the majority of the training are 20-something-year-olds sitting in San Francisco. And that does not represent the rest
The
of
global
world
population.
at all, not even US, right?
Yeah.
And
Right.
so this, I highly recommend. Have any of you seen Black Mirror, Joan is Awful?
No.
I've seen a bunch of. I don't know if I've seen that one.
Okay, you would know. You have to watch it. Everybody should watch
Okay,
it.
what's it called?
Okay, Netflix, Black Mirror, Joan
Yeah.
is Awful. And what it is it basically says you signed up for Netflix and you downloaded the app on your phone. Okay. And part of the user agreement when you download it, you didn't realize you accepted this. It is that it can listen to you all the time. Okay. And it's allowed to have video on. And so all of a sudden this thing's with you. Well, as soon as you become a subscriber, like it gives you them the right to build a movie or TV show based on your life. So this person's like, wait a minute, watches the TV show and it's like, that's my life. What the heck's going on? Like I said all that stuff exactly. It's just somebody that looks a little different than me, but this is my life. And it's just kind of crazy. And then she tries to sue and they're like, no, but you signed the user agreement. Well, the funny thing is the actor wasn't a real actor either. That actor is like, wait a minute, that's me. Why am I being, and it's like, oh, because you signed the user agreement. We're allowed to use your likeliness. It's a really fun show. You should watch it.
Yeah, that sounds awesome.
Yeah.
I think we've done. I think South Park did the best episode ever on people that never read the EULA, which is like all of us. But that's
But when
terrifying.
when it comes to controls, though, I mean, it's one thing to sit here like this. This feels like the software development life cycle of, hey, before you start building, we should implement some controls. We know better. We've been through this before, and then nobody ever does it. And at the rate at which everybody's jumping on AI, like the generative AI and all the stuff that's coming out, it's I'm going to be there first because the first one there is going to be the one that's going to capitalize on this. How fast are we going to blaze past any type of controls that, just like everything else in technology, controls will be starting to be implemented about a decade behind, and then we'll be a century behind actually having a majority of people implementing those, right? Like it's easy to say, hey, we should have some controls and we should start talking about this. But by the time we get that first meeting, 30 companies have already pushed out pretty advanced solutions that aren't going to follow that stuff. And then to get people to, and then start, you know what I mean? Like, how do you stop the presses and say, no, we have to do this versus.
So I'll say something really short, James. I want to hand it to you on this. That the major, what we see is 30% of people at a large enterprise are saying just block, except for maybe a few people. So they think on or off, either allow it or don't. And a few people get to have it, the ones that are trying to enable the business and code against this. And so there's not a lot of inspection outside on or off. And then another massive, the rest of the massive group is just not doing anything. They're like, oh, that's kind of crazy. Should we block it? Oh no, there's some people that want it. They're just not. And then there is a small segment that's growing. That's like, no, but fine, enable it. It's important for our business, but let's prompt those people. Let's inspect the data. Let's understand and protect them from doing something dumb. Right. So James, like maybe you can talk a little bit about what we're doing even personally.
Yeah, yeah. So it is multiple parts. One, I think most folks are missing out on the opportunity to educate and communicate. Back, this is a great chance for you to say, hey, remember, we have secrets, we have intellectual property that all of us are invested in creating and maintaining and delivering to our customers. And yes, there is a huge opportunity here, and we need to position ourselves with buying power. Buying power is it. I'll throw something out there. How many trivia? How many times do you think we've been asked about our governance and controls for our own use of ML and AI inside of our product sets?
Few.
Raf, James, thoughts?
Few.
0.
Two, actually. 2 times. 2 times in the last 6 months since the beginning of the year as ChatGPT started taking off. And by very mature programs, financial services, actually, have asked
Makes
us,
sense.
which then in turn made us reflect and say we should probably be asking a little bit more. So now we ask also as we're getting into vendor contracts and relationships. Now our question is the assumption of should we just assume everyone is going to be leveraging this technology inside of their services they offer us, which is where I'm leaning toward. And then you get into the framework, or do we need to do the inventory? Because if you actually follow it, everyone says you should inventory where AI is being used and how that is delivered in your services. But I say just assume everyone is going to be leveraging this technology because all of us have been leveraging products that have data sciences in the back end of them. Let's just be honest, right? And so it's just how much and how do you govern it? But then also on kind of the flip side, so you take that opportunity, you educate, you learn from it, you start to position yourself, again, going back to some of the basics, reduce your attack surface. Not everyone needs to have access. Understand where is it being leveraged, do the education, understand why people are using it, and then start blocking and make sure that you have protections for your critical data. The one things that you really are worried about. In a couple of programs that Jason and I worked together on, you know how we measured what we needed to protect when we're moving into the organization? First question, what could hurt us? What could kill us? Take the things that can kill you, make sure you have tight protections around them. Things that can hurt you, you'll get to them later, right? Because then at least I have these protections in place. What could hurt you? What could kill you? Same scenario plays out, reduce the attack surface, understand the channels, what could hurt you, what could kill you, protect what could kill you, and then start to move towards education to protect the stuff that could hurt you. And then you're going to have fallout. And that's why we build programs that both, prevent things from happening, but then also respond when shit does go bad. Now you're basically mapping it into your framework and what you're doing. And you also have vendor governance and control in there because you have buying power. So, I think it's on all of us as leaders and program managers to push more. But I mean, I'm surprised that we've only had 2 inbound. Honestly,
Yeah.
Yeah. And once we had those inbound questions, what was funny is the chairperson for our AI governance committee said, "Oh, this shit's blowing up. Let's get you better answers, and let's actually revisit the governance committee and make sure that all the controls are in place because I don't want to be answering these myself." Right?
Yeah.
Like, because we just let the business feel it. We're like, hey, guess what? We got another inbound question, and this seems very, very detailed, right? And so we actually drove it out that way, and then we got buy-in. We got business buy-in because also at the same time it was coming inbound for people who were buying our products and services. So it supports revenue. We all want to be part of the business. Then be part of the business. Support the revenue.
Yep.
Oh, yep.
All right. Well, I'm gonna give you guys. I got a minute, so let's figure out in 30 seconds each to Jason and James. What's the next 3 years gonna bring, Jason? 30 seconds.
I think there will definitely be some holy shit moments, and that's going to wake up everybody. And I do believe it's going to be where bad decisions get made because of them relying on a response that they're getting, and significant bias. I think we're definitely going to see a lot more policy. And third, like the holy shit moment is going to be at the enterprise level. There's going to be something where something gets stolen and gets exposed and gets used against you by your competition, and then you don't even know what to do about it. And then every organization out there is going to start to try and figure out how to. They know that they have to enable this, but secure it? And how do you do both at the same time?
Fair. Robinson.
I agree. I think that we'll see. We're doomsday, right? That's why we're in security. So we'll go with doomsday first.
Nice.
Something bad will happen. I think that I'll shorten it up a little bit. I think in the next 2 months, as Black Hat's around the corner, we're probably going to see co-pilots everywhere, and it's going to be right. It was AI everywhere. Now it's going to be co-pilots everywhere. We're going to see this rapid explosion of co-pilots in everything that everyone does, and I think there's a lot of good uses there because we make a lot of dumb decisions because we're moving quick, and co-pilots can help you out with that. And I think that we'll see some more regulation that definitely comes. I would like to see the community invest more into the OWASP top 10. I know there's a couple of different frameworks that have been released inside of OWASP top 10 kind of for ML and LLMs. Jump on those, take a look at them, model those back. We've taken them back into stride categories so our developers can use them ourselves. Push on this. This is your opportunity.
I think the next election, I think we're going to see some very interesting stuff around this as well.
Yeah.
Forgot about that.
Yeah, to add to, I'll close it off by saying, guys, thanks for joining us. But I think I'm going to add to Robinson's thought and put a tagline to it: enabling bad decisions at rapid scale. Is because we make bad decisions when we move quickly. We're going to make worse decisions by moving quicker without fact checking ourselves because we don't think we will need to. Anyway, that's a great place to end up. Thanks, guys. Thanks for being on the show. This has been fun. It's good seeing you guys again, although same place, 2 different rooms. Robinson clearly got the short end of the stick on the bandwidth,
he's in the worst part of the house. I should have told him. He literally is like the farthest away from the
mesh.
Orbeez.
You cracked me up. All right, guys, thanks a lot. This has been another episode of the Down to Security Rabbit Hole podcast. James, always interesting discussions, and Mr. Robinson, Mr. Clark, thank you for joining us. Thanks, Netscope, for bringing you guys on board, and we'll talk to you another time, another place, on another Down to Security